which is really just for information purposes and to tell you about the public presentation aspect of that coming up. We're then going to have a pretty significant presentation on the whole Piers 5 to 8 area. This is on the concept plan for what Pier 5 to 7 will look like, and I think you'll think it's a fantastic, it's a great milestone for us in that respect. We're going to then do a very quick update as it relates to the Promenade Park on Pier 8, which I know a lot of people are interested in. And then we are going to get into the Discovery Center, the former Discovery Center building kind of issue. I'm going to lead it off, do a bit of a background presentation so that everybody in the room kind of knows from where we're actually standing on the issue. Councillor Farr is then going to come up and say a few words about the same issue. And then the remainder of the evening is really completely up to you as to tell us what it is that you wish to tell us about the Discovery Center. We have kind of broken the Q&A kind of in two different sections, but they can all meld into one. The idea is that we would have about a half hour of Q&A on the Discovery Center issue, and then another half hour on other issues if you have any. But with that said, we can meld both of those together and go right to the end if you want to stay on the single issue as well. That's we'll let the room kind of decide.
Chris and Councillor Farr. Jason, I can't see you. I know you're here.
I'm here. I can hear you.
I'm sure the crowd would love to see you, Jason.
Yeah, I'm here. I'm kind of blocked here. I waited here earlier, so I went back.
Can I just, given that we've invited people here, a number of us have, to talk about a specific issue, we do understand there are many issues and ideas related to Pier 8 and the West Harbor. Can I just get a quick show of hands who would like to reverse the agenda and start with the Discovery Center? Can I? Absolutely. So Councillor Farr, if you can have a look at this, because a lot of these people are your constituents, and I'm one of them. There seems to be no reason why we couldn't accommodate the needs of so many people.
No issue with that.
Could I suggest that we do that?
It's not my meeting. It's a waterfront.
Hey, we do this every couple of months for 2 years now, and there's an agenda. So, like, other people came to listen.
It's okay. I really don't have an issue. If it's okay with our presenters and the staff aren't going anywhere and can hold off, then I have no issue.
So I will say this, though, on that, as a person who's working on the file, I believe there's information in the front half that you will actually, we are going to end up answering many of the questions that many of you actually have as it relates to that. The only other thing I kind of say, Graham, with respect, would be, you asked how many are here for the Discovery Center.
No,
how many are here for the other issue?
Chris, I did not. I asked how many would like to reverse the agenda. That's all I asked.
So then those who would not like to reverse the agenda, can we ask that question as well?
Question to the floor.
Okay.
Who doesn't want to reverse the agenda? So do we use majority or not?
As Councillor said, I have no issue.
I'm here all night.
As I said, I do think that we'll end up kind of reverting back to some of the slides because we're going to answer the questions.
Well, let's see if we do.
Sure, fair enough.
And thank you for being flexible.
Yeah. So I will give you then, let me reverse my order here. So okay, I'm going to start first with this visual. I want to make sure everybody kind of understands the context here, the one element to this. Our entire West Harbor plan is holistic for the entire area, from Barton Tiffany all the way over to Central Park, Bayfront Park, all the way over to Pier 4 or Pier 8, including Eastwood Park. So from the broad West Harbor perspective, I want to make sure everybody kind of realizes that individual elements, we can have discussions as it relates to individual elements. But the reality is that all of it is actually designed to work together. So there's institutional uses on Pier 4, there's institutional uses on Pier 8, there'll be new institutional uses, there's park space, there's open parks, it all kind of works together from that aspect. Relating to the Discovery Center itself, or the former Discovery Center property, key element of this is the plan that is both out there with an RFP right now as it relates to selling of the land. But what's important to actually know about this plan is this is exactly setting sail. The setting sail secondary plan is the one that actually laid out what the land use for this area was. Back in 2005, it was actually approved by council. One of the key things to this, including all these development blocks and exactly what it is that they're used for. A couple things of note is most of these development blocks are mixed use commercial, some retail, mostly residential, some other commercial aspects as well. The blue area here though is zone institutional. So one of the 9 blocks that is in the RFP for the private sector developer is actually for institutional use, which is this one here. What you will see from this line that's kind of separated in the background is prior to, or when we issued the RFP in 2017, there was a lease, a land lease on this area here. It was originally the Parks Canada or federal government land. That land has been transferred over to the city of Hamilton. But in the meantime, there was a land lease from the federal government to the Hamilton Waterfront Trust. And that land lease was there, and that was a legal land lease on the property. So when we took out the Pier 8 property to the RFP process, and right from the beginning of all this, it was with the knowledge that there was a land lease on here. That land lease actually, put a problem, set up an encumbrance on these 3 development blocks, including this blue one here. The key thing also to know about this area, that's the area that's basically the parking lot today. That's kind of so that you orient yourself. The area that is the parking lot today is makes up 3 of the development blocks that we're putting out. And so we actually disclosed to all the development proponents that there were 2 kind of encumbrances on Pier 8 that were already on the land already. The one was a land lease with the Hamilton Waterfront Trust. It actually went till the year 2054. The other is Brewers Marine. Brewers Marine is in place on Pier 8, has been for a long period of time, and they occupy, give or take, this area here. They have a lease that runs until 2025. So from the developer's perspective, they know going in that these 2 things are there that they have to actually deal with. So because that was kind of an issue that we were kind of looking at, what has really happened since? And this is the piece that I want to make sure as we enter this kind of discussion, that everybody understands what the elements are that we have actually done. What are the actions that have actually been taken? So council agreed to the solicitation process, as we said, going out to the private sector developers. There was 9 development blocks, as I said. All those 9 development blocks in our RFP is predicated on setting sail, the urban design study, the community vision that many in this room actually helped participate in. There were 3 elements of that overlapped. On January 24th of this year, so just passed in January 24th, council actually approved an agreement to terminate the Hamilton Waterfront Trust land lease. And so just going back to this diagram here so that we're aware of what that means the black line disappears. There is no new lease on the property. City of Hamilton already owned the property. Now it means that there's no lease on the property as well. On January 24th as well, in that same meeting, council also said one of the questions, and many of you are here to actually discuss this exact same issue. So what do we do with it? And that's kind of the issue that's really up for discussion. Council was having that same discussion. Staff actually recommended at that moment in time that one of the things we should actually look at doing is rolling in some way, shape, or form to see if we could accommodate it within the RFP. And so what they did is they asked us to investigate the feasibility, including the Discovery Center building, as rolling it into the RFP. So us as staff took that away. We kind of decided, or we thought about it to figure out how could we actually roll this in? Is it possible? Is it feasible? What are the pros and cons as it relates to the process itself? And one of the things that the developers or the RFP process actually needs to know if we actually are going to roll it in there. And what we kind of came up with was the fact that, there's many unknowns.
I don't know what roll it into the RFP means.
So we have an RFP. Sorry, great question. I could have, we have a request for proposals out there with the development industry right now with 4 developers who will actually develop the Pier 8 lands.
Okay.
It's called an RFP, it's called a
Well, that's
request
the
for
RFP,
proposal.
okay.
Yeah. So what we did is we decided to tell the development industry, based on the council direction that we have, that we were not prepared to do anything specific, tell them anything specific about the former Waterfront Trust, or the Waterfront Trust Center building, former Discovery Center building. So what we did is we put what is called a right of first negotiation. We told the developers that as staff, we would take a recommendation to council when we go in June to say, hey, there is a way that you can kind of see if the development industry has either an interest in what to do with the building, if the uses, that sort of thing. We roll it in as a right of first negotiation into that. To date, that is all that's actually happened. There has been no action other than those. Here's all the key thing as what hasn't happened. The building has not been sold. The building is not actually up for sale. I want to make sure that that's kind of perfectly clear with everybody in the room. There's been no council decision on what the future is of that building. Today's discussion is a great discussion, great time for that discussion. But want to make sure that we're entering the conversation and the dialogue in the fact that there has been no decisions made on that itself at all. All we've done is said that as staff going to council in June, we will put forward a right of first negotiation clause for council to determine. They can either vote for it, not vote for it, amend it, whatever they wish to do as it relates to the RFP.
Can you explain to us what a right of first negotiation is?
Right.
Exactly what that entails and what that binds the city to if they put that into the RFP?
Great question. Doesn't bind the city to anything. The city can actually, is the one who determines what conditions would go on that right of first negotiation. All it means is that the city can't sell it to somebody else without giving this party the right to negotiate on it first. But the city can set whatever conditions it wants on all of it. No different than we have had on the rest of the Pier 8 lands right from the very beginning. So the notion would be the first thing that a developer is going to ask is, so what can I do with it? Do I have to keep the building? Can I rezone it? Do I have to use it for institutional uses? Those are all questions that would have to be answered. We would have to answer them in that negotiation period. If we were to say things that they don't want, we'd say, well, thanks for the right to negotiate, but I'm not interested in doing X, Y, or Z, so I'll pass. Then they still have the right on the rest of the Pier 8 lands themselves.
Question.
Sorry, I'm trying to, I just want to make sure I'm certainly willing to answer questions or whatever. I also don't want to, I know that.
It's about what you're talking
Yep.
about. The Waterfront Trust property, that's not up for grabs, is it?
So it depends on what you actually mean by Waterfront Trust property. So
Like the coffee shop and
No.
stuff like that, are they?
No.
They city hands?
no, all the green that you see on the map here, for those of you who can't, the entire promenade, the ice rink area, the Williams area, none of that is up for is even in contemplation of this. The right of first negotiation would solely be around the building. That does bring up though a point when we talk about what lands are. I want to make sure everybody's clear. The parking lot area, which is part of that whole area, part of the 8 acres that has been talked about, is already in the RFP. The city of Hamilton has already determined that it was selling the parking lot area already. So that part has always been in the RFP.
The building itself, can it be torn down?
I haven't been determined yet.
So it's up to the city on the proposal or the successful bidder or whatever?
No, up to the city, yes, not nothing to do with the successful proponent. They have no say in it. The RFP was never about the building. The building was never in the RFP to begin with. The only thing we're adding is a right of first negotiation on the building in case the city ever wants to sell it. That's all. And the main determining factor of that is just from pure logistics. If you've got one developer, let's assume for a second, and I hate to if you have a developer over here and you have a property that's potentially not City of Hamilton owned, you know, you want it to fit with the rest of the development. That's the only rationale for the right of first negotiation. As it relates to the city though, the city hasn't made any decision on the property, on the building, and would set all those conditions up front even if we did go into the negotiation. As the person who's probably gonna end up going into the negotiation, with fairness to Councillor Farr, that's the one thing I'm gonna be asking the council. So you want me to negotiate? What are the parameters you want? What are the things that you want or don't want to do with the building?
Well, keep the building.
Fair enough, great point.
Just a clarification on the parking lot area. When you say parking lot area, there's a great area right in front of the Discovery Center, but then we also have behind where all the old warehouses that have been torn down, they use that for parking now. So are you talking about the area immediately in front of the entrances to the Discovery Center?
Yes, trying to be visual here for a second, because you're right, there's all sorts of different parking lots. I'm talking about the parking lot that is the most formalized parking lot with the bioswales in the middle of it. The triangular parking lot that if it came down Discovery Drive today, right, you kind of wind in here, it's basically in this area. But as you can see, the rest of Pier 8 is slated for development, and it always was.
So you talked about this holistic plan that was created for the entire area, and I assume the Discovery Center was there when this holistic plan was created, correct?
The physical building? Yeah. Well, so I think what
I'm trying to get to is, if we have this big plan that talks about, you know, multiple uses, and there's some institutional use, and there's residential use, and there's some commercial use, and the Discovery Center was there when this plan was created. Now we're talking about maybe it's not going to be there.
It was owned by the federal government at the time the plan was created.
Right, so it would have been there.
Municipal hands.
And that would have been part of the plan. So now we're looking at a different
Well,
plan.
the museum was there, right? The Discovery Center Museum.
So there's been, I think it's fair to say though, and many in this room know this, there's several iterations of the plan over time. The physical building was there, yes. It was a museum, as Councillor Farr said, but most recently, it wasn't a museum.
And the lands weren't even ours. At that point, we hadn't done the deal with the feds on expediting the Pier 8 lands.
Right, so a bunch of things have changed. And I think that's just what I'm trying to get at, is that the federal land was not going to be rolled into or be freed up as we're looking at now. So I just think I'm aware of a lot of changes happening, and that I think that's going to be something that's vitally important to consider, and even the idea of tearing down a building, it's changing the nature of this plan, this whole area.
Great point. I'll finish off on two more bullet points, and then Councillor, if you want to.
No, I personally don't have any interest at all in tearing down the building. I don't know where that rumor may be getting circulated, but then again, because of the evolution you're talking about and the different changes that happen in this specific area of recent, maybe that's where you speak. Some may have discussed that in some other circle that I hadn't been aware of. It's the first I've heard of it. Certainly nothing I'd be interested in.
But the building itself,
nor most of my colleagues, I would suspect.
The building itself has been built for the community, and has a community use.
Right.
And I think that piece is front and center. And I think that's what I'm imagining most people in this room are interested in.
Yeah, I'm interested in hearing different community uses and institutional uses for that building. This is why I think most of the people who raised their hand are here tonight. So that's hopefully the prevailing theme that we have.
Yep.
So should we finish this?
And then
take some questions? Oh, did you finish
go
that
ahead.
last slide?
I mean, what's
Can
next?
you go back to that?
Sorry,
I'm not sure if did you do the last two bullets or did I miss it?
Just
no direction given to as any conditions that may be placed in the right of the first negotiation. Yes, you did make that good point. No discussion has taken place regarding the changes of any of the existing uses. Good. Okay.
So the ice rink's staying, the park's staying. The there's been no decision, no even discussion on any of that. So anyone who's concerned about that being the case, that's hopefully alleviates your fears.
So thank you, Chris, and probably gonna rely on you and maybe some staff if needed, and we're ready and willing and able to spend most of this time, however much time, but given that we changed the order, I think there's definitely a number of people in this room that are gonna wanna see the Pier 5, 6, 7 update. Some of you are here that have spent years, since 2015, even beyond, engaging on this $140 million investment by the taxpayers of Hamilton, and you've got a good 24 million update on some very recent good news and progress as to what's happening and when we're going to begin that Promenade Park, which is like literally months away, and it's a beautiful park, and I'm sure a lot of you are aware of that. So hopefully you can stick around for that. I'll give you sort of the political side and then fire away. Hopefully you can spend a lot of time offering suggestions. We have a note taker. I've read all the tweets. I've seen the Avery suggestions. I've seen the museum, the Hamilton Museum suggestion, which is great. The library suggestion, and certainly there was a lot of play on social media on that, and I'm sure I'll hear more about that tonight. But politically, number one, I don't have an interest in changing an institution. I don't want to see anything other than an institutional designation. But I did support, and I will continue to support, where we're at right now with respect to allowing the 4 proponents to come back with their ideas. And I think part of that is, number one, the motion was from Councillor Collins. I actually have the motion. I've highlighted parts of it that might help me at least explain to you why, number one. But again, politically, we have, again, a pretty major investment and a sound proposal through an amendment to a motion in January of 2018 that suggested let's focus on this for now and see if there's a benefit to incorporating it into the Pier 8 development. And by benefit, there's a savings quite clearly, there's an opportunity, and the other piece is that it was literally part and parcel to the unencumbrances that Chris touched on. Politically, it was about getting out of a Waterfront Trust 38-year legal lease to still manage a good chunk of the Pier 8, a good chunk of 4 of 9 parcels of Pier 8 on the $140 million overall West Harbour plan. And we all know, and many people in this room have engaged on that Pier 8 plan. And that's not just here's the keys to the land, developer, do whatever you want. A lot of what we engaged on, the complete streets, the complete community, the passive designs, the good urban designs, the heights that stick to the city sale secondary plan policies that took decades to get into place, and that area is still actually under appeal, and some of the people who are appealing it are here tonight, I see. All of that has something to do politically with where we went with at least investigating the feasibility and looking at this right of first negotiation. Because when we did the deal with the Waterfront Trust, the experts, the third party, that both parties who had to do the deal to get unencumbered those 38 years, had to come up with a number. The number was $3 million, or $230,000 a year to the Waterfront Trust over 15 years, or if all of this plays out, one-time lump sum of the value of whatever we do get for the sale if we were to sell the Discovery Center.
But we're not selling.
If we were.
Oh, sorry, I misunderstood.
If this led, very good, if this led to incorporating it in, we're investigating now whether or not we incorporate it into the development, into the Pier 8 development with the 4 proponents.
What's the timeline for this right of first
I heard
negotiation?
June is when staff will be reporting back to us. Is that correct?
That's correct on that. As far as the...
That's a public meeting. We should note this politically too. So this is one public meeting, an opportunity for everybody to offer their opinions, which is great. Engagement is great. Early engagement is even better, and this is early engagement. And then this public meeting will also be another opportunity, and possibly other opportunities after that.
One of.
Good question.
One of, but then how long can this prolong?
Well, it depends on how...
There's not a deadline?
Well, there's a deadline on the RFP, I believe. What's the deadline on the RFP?
So the deadline on the
should be done soon.
it'll be, we'll go to council with our recommendation in June. Then there'll be a negotiation. If your question was how long is the right of negotiation?
Well, the deadline on the RFP is
The deadline on the RFP is next week.
Next week.
April 4th.
Well, the right of negotiation, really, because there's going to be a lot of
Yes.
deciding what's going to be and what's not going to be, and then...
So I don't
There's
have
gotta be
a,
a deadline.
we don't have a definitive deadline on it. What our expectation is we told them it's time limited. It's a very quick, they don't get it forever. They get it for a small period of time until we negotiate the rest of the deal.
Just to my stance on that issue, that a lot of past history has happened that over prolonged negotiations result in over expenditure on bids for things that are gonna happen. Like the cost for construction today, and then the plan doesn't happen until 5 years, and
Couldn't agree with you. Couldn't agree with you
Like
more.
it's knowing that there's a timeline that things are, people know, you know?
We wish, there's so many exciting things in this $140 million investment that we'd love to see all happen tomorrow, and it's taken, you're right, over 20 years now, really. So it's a good point. I wish for projects to be happening in a much more expedited. Ward 2, this is Ward 2. This is me.
You're Ward 2?
Yes, but this was a council decision minus 2 parts of 1 motion, two nays were Robert Pasuta and Donna Skelly on a part of this. So I see Graham and then Matt. Graham?
Yeah, I just wanted to because Chris, thank you for providing context. I'd like to sort of amplify the context. I attended well over a dozen meetings in this space. Mr. Phillips facilitated every one of them. Staff were here. Jason, you were here for almost everyone, if not everyone.
No, almost.
Yeah, fair enough. Not once was the Discovery Building in play ever mentioned. Not once. The parking lot was. So we will accept that. But you never mentioned the Discovery Center. Number 2, in today's Spectator, the community report with Mayor Eisenberger's name on the cover 5 times, which is fine. I don't know how he got away with it, but good for him, I guess. There's a half a page that describes the waterfront, and it describes our assets on the waterfront, down to the ice rink, Williams Coffee, and the Discovery Center is not mentioned anywhere in this document and not anywhere on that half page. So if I may, also, Mayor Eisenberger was on Cable 14. He talked about having to change the zoning of the Discovery Center from institutional to something. He didn't say what. All I'm saying is, you perhaps can appreciate our confusion. You can also perhaps appreciate our confusion because, Councillor, you never, not once until less than 48 hours ago, put anything out about the Discovery Center, about the motion. You say, Councillor Collins, I believe you also said Mayor Eisenberger seconded.
Mayor moved the first motion, and Collins was the amendment that speaks to this.
So we've invested huge amounts of time. I've largely enjoyed it. It's been a bit frustrating sometimes, but Chris Phillips didn't tell us. You didn't tell us. The mayor's telling us something different. A document we all paid for, pumping up the city and our accomplishments, oddly enough, doesn't refer to the very building a lot of us are asking about. We like to keep it public. We don't know what should be in it yet. Ideas have been put out, but to say it's not for sale, it is in play. If it isn't Chris Phillips, then you are wasting the time of these once 5, now 4 developers by getting them to try to imagine what they do with something that isn't for sale.
Sorry, let me just be clear though of what it is that we're actually doing. I think it's totally fair and valid point, Graham, your first point as it related to the building. Yeah, we've never discussed the building. As I go back to that map, the building up until a month and a half ago or so was actually under a land lease with the Hamilton Waterfront Trust Center for till 2058, right?
Yes, that's the
so from the building standpoint,
Portions
you're
of
totally right.
the.
But as it relates to it not being for sale, I mean, it isn't for sale. I mean, all the developers in the RFP document, you don't see any mention of the Discovery Center building in the RFP. The reason for that is obvious, no different than what I said earlier on, because up until when the RFP was issued, the building, there was no council motion on the building. The right of first negotiation is simply that. And as I explained, it's not for sale. Ultimately, it will be council who will determine whether or not it is or isn't for sale. As it relates to the four developers, though,
Do you want to sell the building?
I want to see how this plays out. I support this. This is great engagement, Graham, and you're obviously, this is the first of a few people that are going to speak to don't sell the building. I'm well aware of that, but I have committed, as your elected official here in Ward 2, to play this out. I'm interested to see how it lands. I'm as interested to hear your ideas, and you can have this prevailing theme of don't sell the building, we want to keep it public. We're not selling the building, we're doing this right of first negotiation. And I am also interested in maintaining the building architecturally, not demolishing the building, and I'm interested in the institutional uses that have been described. It is unorthodox, absolutely. Mostly public uses happen in publicly operated and maintained buildings. In this case, we're doing a massive RFP on probably the most valuable piece of waterfront land in Ontario at this point. And there is probably likely going to be some value to some of the proponents. Somebody wrote already about one who's making a pitch to the library, who actually is pitching the library. If we were to negotiate successfully ownership or the operation even, who knows, of the Discovery Center, would you be interested in putting a library there? It was on a public agenda that was well published not too long ago. So there's already one proponent that we know of that has an interest in doing what some of the people in this room would like to see. So I'm interested to see it play out. The other thing I'm going to say about Fred's annual insert in the spec, it's too bad we couldn't have done the first part first, because there's a myriad of wonderful public amenities that he also didn't mention that we're going to get an update on. This $140 million investment. We are opening up the water's edge to all of Hamilton and whoever else wants to come and visit. You know that. You're right. You were at all the meetings. In fact, there was many, many meetings for a lot of years. And you had a lot of say. And in fact, you were very successful in another way. And I'm not pandering to Grant Cropper right now. I know he's my nemesis tonight. But you got 5%. You really worked it, and you got 5% of affordable housing in this RFP in Pier 8 that we never contemplated. Matt.
On that point, we asked for a lot more than 5%.
Yeah, it's not affordable.
You got 5.
Should be 0.
But I don't
we need taxes.
I can't. Hang on, Matt. Hang on, Matt. Okay, go ahead.
It's going to be years before shovels hit the ground on Pier 8 development, correct? Years, like years and years.
no.
What's the realistic timeline on that?
What's a realistic timeline that we believe?
To start, like the actual shovels in ground.
You'll see roads and sewers and water mains and a park this year. You'll see development hopefully starting next year.
Okay.
And then the park is this spring. The $9 million promenade, we did the contest, the call out, that's this spring. And the update on Pier 5-6 on the $15.5 million. Pier 5-6 is a finish date of 2020. Pier 5-6 is. If I'm correct. 2020, the finish date?
I do want to just, Graham mentioned the developers and so did you. I want to make sure, because one of the things on the agenda later on is actually to tell you that come April 6th, you're actually going to get a chance to see what the developers are proposing. I want to make sure that we're clarified though. The Discovery Center building is not in the RFP. So they are not proposing, no one is proposing anything for the Discovery Center because it's actually not part of the RFP itself. There is an institutional block that's in the RFP itself that they would be proposing those institutional uses.
And I've already let on what some of my interests in leaning would be. The other thing I just want to say really quickly here, folks, I don't mind, I signed up for this. If you want to beat me down, that's not a problem. Really, throw the rotten tomatoes, I'm cool with all of that. There's a lot of people in this room that collectively asked of me things that I hadn't contemplated before that we ended up doing. So I'm here to listen, and I'm going to do that respectfully. I hope not myself to get short with anybody, but throw all your ideas or any comments at me, and perhaps like in the past when we ended up spending, I think it's up to $4 million to do public budgeting, that was an idea that originated in a group like this, in a room full of people who said you need to spend a portion of our taxpayers on ideas that we come up with, and we did stuff like that. Millions into parks that were designed by the community where people like you got together and actually made your park. You designed your parks. And I listened. So I'm doing the same here tonight Albeit, I agree, this is an unorthodox scenario, and it deserves some attention here tonight, at the very least to bring some clarity. So thank you for that in advance. And yes, in the back, you got to yell. Next to Matt. Is this Maureen? Hi, Maureen.
The process, and because I don't understand the process, I'm going to use a really weak analogy. So, if I wanted to renovate my home, what I would normally do, I think, is I would identify what my family needs in my home. And I would set those out as prerequisites or guiding principles. And then I would go out to some contractors, and I think I would ask them, could you bid on this? And they'll bid, and they'll give me how they would implement those principles. So I'm trying to think of that in terms of this. What are our principles guiding us in our discussions with the private contractors, or are we relying on them to define what we think we want?
So it's a good question. And as we've noted a few times now already, we did your analogy as it relates to a large chunk of Pier 8. You know, there was lots and lots of years of what kind of community do we want there, and ultimately that informed the RFP process. You're speaking specifically to the Discovery Center, and so I'll let Chris answer technically, I'll answer politically again. It's a good analogy. We're still kind of discussing how we want to renovate our home. And some of the players in that discussion, as approved by council in January, and as part, it was approved by council because it was part of getting rid of a 38-year encumbrance. It was part of that whole discussion. And one of the options early to embed in that discussion was to go out and do this and take a look at this. So there is no blueprint on how to renovate the kitchen. There's no tile picked out for the bathroom. There's no shingle picked out for the roof just yet. That's kind of where we're at. As Chris said, it's very early on. So I don't know if you have another...
No, I mean, sorry, Maureen, wait, just so I'm clear, you are talking about just the Discovery Center building as opposed to the rest of the lands?
I am.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay.
I would assume that as a public agency, you would be going out and identifying what this community thinks it needs and wants, as opposed to waiting for private developers to define it.
So, it's a valid point. I would say, though, that the RFP itself actually stipulates all those things. In fact, setting sail stipulates all those things. So it's zoned institutional and park, as an example, right? There is a whole list of things that the community said back in those days as to what constitutes institutional uses. I think the only thing about the private sector developer as it relates to the building is, are there uses that, based on what you'll see in the next few weeks from their development, does it trigger other imaginations of what could be possible in the building? I don't know. I don't presume to say that, to know that as it may. My kind of point, though, would be, instead of kind of deciding, let's just say today, we all know we're not deciding anything necessarily today, but instead of deciding today in a vacuum, see what the developers themselves are going to propose for the rest of the area, and it may string together uses that maybe nobody in this room has actually thought about, because it actually matches some of the other things that they're doing.
Or a combination of uses.
Or a combination of all. But if the community wants to just talk about the building, and just using one of the examples, you want it to be a museum, there's no problem with that. As it relates to the right of first negotiation, it actually doesn't preclude that. We as the community, as the city, would say to them, it must be a museum. The developer will say, well, I'm not interested in building a museum, and therefore I leave my right. Or the city says it's not on the block anymore.
Mr. Phillips, you're taking too much time.
So, Brian, don't worry,
okay.
No, it's okay. I'm surprised I didn't get that happily yet. Brian.
First,
hey, Brian.
It's either
building?
Yeah.
It's a right of first negotiation. It's not one of the development blocks. It's a separate negotiation if there is. But the whole premise of that is that we would determine what it is that they could or could not do with the facility. They would then determine whether or not they actually want it for what those conditions are. Sorry, I
work for developer Solai.
Yep.
You're asking for first right of negotiation. Somebody says, I'll build you a nice shiny building, but you gotta give me that discovery center, or I'm not gonna build the shiny building as you've offered it.
It's not quite like that. They're already part of an RFP process on the 9th.
they're already there.
And we've already given them the parameters, very intrinsic, very detailed parameters.
So would you say that on a Thursday reading night before long weekend that this is a pretty good?
I'd say it's a great crowd. And you know what? I was going to insist that we don't do it before, that we staff don't call meetings before long. Sam's going through the same thing right now in the East End, by the way, at Roxborough. You know what? We're going to keep it moving, Brian. Those were good points. Sean wanted to ask a question.
Yeah, well, actually, I want to
Or
make
make
a
a
comment,
comment.
which is that if we want this land to be used for public purposes, then it has to be in public hands. It doesn't make any sense to sell it to private interests and expect that subsequently it will somehow be used for public purposes.
I disagree.
Since it's contiguous to Pier 7, which is going to be public uses, and runs around the water all the way, I would really think that we ought to retain that for public purposes. I might also say, I will also say, this improvisation that we're seeing here arises out of the fact that the city, for reasons nobody can quite figure out, has been keeping the Waterfront Trust on life support for many years. What happened with the Discovery Center was that when it ceased to operate as a museum and the Waterfront Trust took it over, the notion was that they would negotiate a lease with somebody, which turned out to be a restaurant. That didn't go very well, probably mismanaged on both sides. It's still going to court. So now the city has decided to try and eliminate that embarrassment and the responsibility of managing that for public purposes by handing it off to the private sector. So they need to both clean up the Waterfront Trust, I suggest, and retain this in public hands and just assume their responsibility.
So, proud Waterfront Trust member, millions and millions of visitors, most of them positive. Some residents are not happy. They never will be. That's fair. Comments are appreciated. You just said you're not happy, Sean, about the Waterfront Trust.
I'm not happy because
You just
the
said
secretive organization that signs a lease that's
I just said we're in court, it's mismanaged, you're not happy. I'm sorry, are you happy about the Waterfront Trust? Am I wrong?
Let's give him a
Or are you happy?
It's not that I will never be happy. You could make me happy.
So let me make the point. Let me make the point, Sean.
Play nice, Jason.
Let me make the point. I know there are people that will never be happy about the Waterfront Trust. I've been dealing with it for 8 years now. There are appellants who never liked the whole thing right from day one, long before my time. It's personal, clearly, in a lot of cases. It's very clear to me now. Fair enough.
No, it is.
So just so I can tell you again politically, I'm sorry that's the reality, folks, but listen, here's the deal. Council had an option to take it into city hands. The taxpayers would have had to pay $1 million a year to do what the Waterfront Trust does now. Period. Council didn't even want to debate that. So if that helps, for the taxpayers that are here, all of you, that's why it was not even touched. Because we heard it would be $1 million to bring it in-house to do exactly what the Waterfront Trust is doing now. And that wasn't something, I don't think any of my colleagues wanted to do. Well, maybe you could say Robert Pasuta and Donna Skelly were interested in looking into that. I can't speak for them, but they voted against this. So, Herman.
2 questions.
One question, please.
The first negotiation is not a term that resonates with me as a lawyer. I understand the term exclusive negotiation rights, and if what you mean by first negotiation is exclusive, it means that you are binding the city that they will not be able to negotiate with McMaster or with the library board or with an independent foundation, right? Otherwise, you could be negotiating with them today, and the developer doesn't get whatever this first negotiation funny concept is.
So first, let me. We have.
Can I finish?
He's got two questions.
Oh, sorry, 2 questions.
Part 2.
I'm going to give you the second half of the first question. if you put this into the RFP, are you, and with this right of first negotiation, are you not handing over to the developer the leverage of negotiating with whatever organization might want to take on this project, whether it's the library, or whether it's the art gallery, or whether it's a foundation, or whether it's McMaster University, or whatever? You've moved the bargainers from the city to one of the four proponents. And if I were one of those four proponents, I would be using that as a hook to get you on something else. So why are you not staying negotiating with the people and the institutions in the city that have an interest in that building that is labeled "Built for the People of Canada"? The plaque is on the side of the building. Why not just say, this is a public use, we're going to not let the developer negotiate with the citizens of Hamilton, your city government is going to negotiate with the citizens of Hamilton.
So I like that. So let me tackle the first part of your question first. First of all, we have a lawyer who has looked at this, and yeah, they no, it's not. First of all, it's exclusive only to the winner. So there's a preferred proponent that'll come out of this RFP process. It's the preferred proponent that gets this right of first negotiation.
To make a pitch to council.
Is it exclusive?
It's exclusive to them for that moment in time.
To make a pitch to council.
Because I'll answer your question if you'd like.
No, but your answer, I need a little bit of. Can you talk to McMaster about this after you've given the exclusive right to the successful proponent?
So the first thing is, we can talk to whoever we want. We own the building is the first. The second is the right of first negotiation is actually not even, council has to approve that. It's not included in the RFP. It's a separate piece. So when we go with the preferred proponent in June to council for them to give us negotiating on the rest of the Pier 8 lands, we'll be asking for them, the recommendation would be to grant this party a right of first negotiation on that property. Council can decide not to. As it relates to the possible tenancy for it, whether it's McMaster or Mohawk, and I think you're going to see this conversation would be a lot easier probably about 10 days from now, you will likely see that all four of the proponents are already talking to those exact same groups and organizations. So their whole point is to build a full holistic community down in their area.
And Herman, you know, public uses are in privately operated buildings. There's libraries in Waterfront Trust. There's Board of Health,
relates to
renting in East Mountain. It's not unprecedented.
As it relates to the negotiation piece, it doesn't actually put us in any worse sake of negotiation. Ultimately, right? We own the land, all of the land. This RFP process is to get a preferred proponent, and ultimately they have to negotiate a final deal structure. Lastly, I'd say on it, none of this is, especially in your particular case, none of this is news. It's all the RFP, the addendums, the wordings, the development agreement are all online on the West Harvard website. So you can actually see what the development agreement actually looks like online. So no, we think we're in a great position as it relates.
It's a simple question. After you select the proponent,
yes,
can the city negotiate with McMaster about the Discovery Center?
With McMaster about the Discovery Center?
Yes. Can you
assuming, hang on a second,
Question.
assuming that council passes the right of first negotiation?
Yes.
No, the right of first negotiation would be, they have the first right to negotiate.
So therefore, you
Now, could the developer negotiate with McMaster
Yes.
to put the same use in the building? Of course they could.
You've moved the negotiator from being the city on a piece of public land to the developer.
Potentially, Herman. Potentially.
But I think what needs to kind of go back, and Graham actually said it earlier on as well, the property itself all works together. The parking lot is part of a broader development. So, you know, it all has to actually work together. The uses in blocks 5, 6, or whatever have to work.
So we're going to keep out. There's lots of questions, and we do really want to get the staff to do the presentation. You already had your two, didn't you?
It was
real quick.
It was a 5-part question
real quick.
One question with 5 parts.
All the trustees.
Hold on, wait. Now start.
Okay. Am I correct that all they voted to wind up the public, those trustees appointed by the city were instructed by the city to wind up the Waterfront Trust, that the assets of the Waterfront Trust would then go to the city automatically to be managed by the Parks Department or something like that, without $3 million being paid over 30 years at 237,000, what is it? Right?
I can only tell you that we received a staff report that said to bring it in-house would be $1 million extra. So that's all I can share with you now. Remember, again, and I mentioned this, Herman, politically, this is all part of the city, Waterfront Trust, council request to negotiate to unencumber the 38 years on 4 of 9 parcels. That's how all of this came about. And that's how the amendment to the resolution that got us here came about. Sorry, you wanted to ask a question.
I'm going to go back to the parking lot question because setting sail and so your West Harbor secondary plan and also the remedial action plan both talk about bringing people back to the harbor. They talk about tourism. They talk about accessibility. So if we don't have a parking lot, how are people getting down to the how are they accessing the harbor? How are they getting down to the harbor? What's going on?
So let me first kind of say this actually is setting sail. Setting sail actually has that parking lot be developed. That is actually right in the document. As it relates to how the parking would work down there, well, all these building blocks will actually have parking incorporated into the buildings. So in the next 10 days or so, you'll see the development plans, and you'll see that there are parking. There's actually going to be probably somewhere in the neighborhood of 1,400 parking spots within the buildings as it relates to
so one per
Pier.
unit.
My kind of sorry.
Right, one per unit.
Well, we also know that we have a parking study, right?
It's
visitors.
The zoning's a little less than 1 per unit.
Voters.
But then there's institutional and commercial uses which have it as well. So
there's also a higher order transit, obviously expectations there, multimodal, lots of opportunities.
But we have figures on how much how many parking spots are going to be available for public and visitors. I mean, I have a real concern that if we don't have space for people to come down, you're talking about bringing more people down. How are we getting them there? Yes, transit one of these days, right? But right now, the situation is we don't have great transit going down there. Yep. And we don't have a lot of options that way. People who are going down there are going down there by car, and we don't know how many parking spots are going to be available. So how are we going to
There's HSR that takes you right down there now. It's not great, but it does. We would want to enhance that. Sorry, it's a really good question. It has parking is the most prevalent issue in the core.
People aren't going down there.
Have you been to past engagement sessions here before?
I haven't been to past engagement sessions here, but
but it's been a big part of the conversation.
Area Restoration Council, and I work for
Royal
Botanical Gardens, and I'm familiar with the West Harbor setting sail. So I don't want to be condescended to, Jason.
I'm not condescending.
I think you're condescending to a bunch of people in this room.
How so? What did I do?
You tell me. Oh, come on.
Sean is an appellant. He's a long-time appellant. I'm sorry. He does not like the Waterfront Trust.
Oh,
if you do, say you do.
I have no such thing.
You just stood up and said it.
I'll just say one thing.
What did I miss, Jason?
Anyway, all right. I apologize to Sean.
I'll say one thing.
If I was condescending, I apologize.
Why don't I say? I'll tell you one thing on the parking. Parking has been, for those in the room, and one of the dilemmas with this file is that we're talking about, you mentioned setting sail. Well, you mentioned setting sail. Setting sail started in 2000 and we're now in 2018.
Right.
So there's faces in this room that come in at different parts of the conversation.
Right, and I was here at
parking,
the beginning too,
parking,
just so you know.
These conversations, there hasn't been a meeting that I've been a part of that hasn't been bogged down on parking. We did an entire session last November. We spent this amount of time talking solely about parking.
In the back there.
We have an entire parking strategy.
You've been you had your hand up for something.
Answer your question. Where is the parking for the public amenities?
We are still working on the study.
Sorry, well, in the short term, Sean, they're actually all on Pier 8.
But you also know we're doing this study. We still are doing a parking study. Yes.
Just to clarify the mechanics of the RFP.
Yes.
Closing very soon, imminent.
Yes.
Imminent closing.
April 4th.
when will we be able to see the results of that publicly? And quite possibly, you're talking about the rights for negotiation. Do the proponents have to submit their ideas at the proposal RFP level for the rights for negotiation?
No, it's not even part of the RFP.
So it's not part of the RFP?
Correct. On the building. On the building, is that what you're?
You're talking about the
You're talking about the right of
So
negotiation for the Discovery Center.
They're going to be awarded based upon their merits of the regular proposal, but you're not even going to know what they're going to do to be able to be granted the rights for negotiation.
No, the right for negotiation on the Discovery building. So the RFP is about all this land and all these development blocks.
I accept that.
Not the building. So not the right of first negotiation is, it would be up to the city to determine its position on how it's going to exercise that right of first negotiation.
We've given the right to those four people.
Give them, no, we haven't, sorry.
Those four are
No,
the first negotiation.
The right of first negotiation is only for the successful proponent.
It's only available to the, there's
To
four
the successful
bidders right now.
proponent, and it would be at that stage that the city, as being probably one of the ones who's going to be at the table, I would expect that we would go in with, here are our conditions. And if our conditions are that it is whatever this room kind of decided to be, then that would be the conditions of the next.
And that would be a public process at that point?
A public in the way that, that to determine the council's going to have to give us the decision to what the negotiating path is.
I clearly see that it would be in my best interest to hold a public meeting in addition to the public meeting, which is a committee meeting. You right next to him. Thank you, Graham. That was snarky, by the way.
Can we move forward just a little bit and can you give us a timeline of what is being developed and when it's going to be developed?
Yes. Well, so you want to get to the second part of the...
On the 4th, we know that the...
Oh, sorry, yeah, we can redo that again, yeah.
And then after, what happens after the 4th? What's in June? What's in July?
Sure.
So one of my dilemmas here is, and I realize everyone kind of wanted to kind of fast forward, the whole preamble of the first bit of the presentation was exactly that. It closes April 4th. There's an entire public presentation. The public will actually see the development, the presentation materials from the developers starting on the 6th to the 17th. And they'll be all over. There's a whole schedule. It's on a slide.
Online?
Sorry?
Online.
Actually, purposely online. In fact, part of the proposals, part of the RFP is that the proponents actually have to do a 3-minute video to explain what it is that they're actually proposing in it. Those will all be on the West Harbor website. There will actually be comments on online exclusively. We're actually also doing a roadshow of the static panels, kind of like this, in places like the library, the art gallery, City Hall, here, Lime Ridge Mall, to name a few. I've got slides on that got punted to the back end of the meeting. So if you want the details on that, stick around. Yes. Well, the point though was that we have the answers to these questions that could have helped precipitate the answers.
Okay, Shaker. A little loud. You gotta get low.
Okay, I can thank you. People may not like what I have to say, but one thing I have to compliment you, since you and Tom Doctor came on the board to the Waterfront Trust, you are at least transparent. That's a fact that has to be done.
Thank you.
And I'm not here to hear all the dirty bonds and what went on with the Waterfront Trust. I sent all the emails to the Tom Doctor.
Thank you.
That's absolute fact.
Okay.
I'm here to ask you a simple question.
Sure.
That is, you were opening statement, but political and staff.
Yeah, because staff went first. I said I'll give you the political view. Yeah, go ahead. Go ahead. Sorry.
In connection with those two,
yes.
I have a simple question.
Sure.
Even today, I'm fighting for the very, that is, council and staff are closely associated.
Okay.
Because my own experience, as you know, I'm sending emails regarding we can save over $2-3 million in tax there.
Okay.
That's a factor. And the other
Are you
one-
saying we're too closely knit, too closely?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
That's a fact.
Okay.
Okay, how they happen? Because so many incorrect information comes to the council, such as future fund and all. The staff doesn't like that. And the second, when the Discovery Center came, I was the first person to oppose it. Councillor Farr, you got the staff here, you can ask that question.
Okay.
Okay, that's number one. Number two, I always say to the Waterfront Trust, we should ask the city in a transparent and accountability for the funding. And that never happened.
So the city should run the waterfront?
I'm coming to that.
Okay.
That never happened.
Oh, okay.
And furthermore, and I can assure you, it does not cost $1 million to bring in-house to the city. Because, Mr. Farr, you got supply of employees in city of town. You know that very well. I know that. And also, my father may presented the presentation, $220,000. You people should have agreed with them. That never happened.
Okay.
The third point I want to say is how they come up with $1 million beyond. It doesn't. The third point I want to emphasize, do not give the maintenance of $140 million to the waterfront manager. Give it to the private sector. That's what happened.
Project management, you mean?
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Thank you.
Because I know how the money. This is the mess you are in. You and Tom Jackson integrated that mess.
Yeah.
I'm here to support you and Tom. These are
Thank you.
some of these things not exposed to the tax.
Okay.
We here 25% of the children go to school undernourished, and 25% of the Hamiltonian people can't afford to pay the rent. You got the employee way over $100,000, $200 million. You start paying. Private sector, if you are working, if you don't make the money, you're out through the window. Here, you stand for health. That's the point I want to tell.
Thank you, Shaker.
I want to compliment you on the
Thank you, Shaker. I really appreciate it. Yes, sir, in the back.
The traffic management plan for the entire project, the entire West Harbour project, is premised on improved service from HSR. And in fact, it's premised on the blast network being completed and being able to provide service to this development. I don't think there's a lot of confidence in the room that HSR is actually able to deliver on that. Provide that transit option for people who are going to be living in these new neighborhoods. What does that do to your management plan, traffic management?
Well, I would suggest that it's imperative that we follow through and offer the multimodal. This is a community. This isn't just about pretty buildings. It's really good, complete streets. There's a whole bunch of factors tied in over decades of planning, and that is part of the planning you noted from the beginning. So
my concern would be is that the best laid plans for traffic fall apart when people demand wider roads and faster roads because the transit system won't meet their requirements.
okay. Yes, Jeremy.
On the potential sale, wherever it goes, of the Discovery Center. So right now, is the Waterfront Trust got $3 million to get out of the land lease. If the building sells, who gets that money?
The Waterfront Trust, according to the motion. So we get paid we being wearing my trust hat now, $230 roughly for 15 years annually, or if the building is sold, lump sum. It's in the motion.
Sorry, up to that amount.
Up to the amount that the
So it
difference.
depends on what it's sold for, obviously.
True. So it's in the motion.
It's not for sale.
No, but Jeremy mentioned if it was sold. Can't answer his question without.
Folks, maybe another 5 or 10 minutes. I know it's important, and Graham rightly asked to move it, and that's fine, but there's really some talented people that want to make some presentations. And I think it'll be helpful to be reminded, again, you know, I think we're all in favor. Is there, maybe there's one or two people here that are not in favor of what we're doing. It is a very, very significant investment, and you're going to get to see in just a few short minutes, hopefully, just how far along we've come, in fact, on either side of the topic we're discussing now. So just a few more, and then we'll get to the second half, which was, yes. Oh, sorry. Yeah, go ahead. You first.
Has any consideration been given to severing the land under the Discovery Center to make the remaining property more regular and perhaps more easily to develop while preserving potential for public usage?
So the question is severing the land underneath the Discovery Center?
That small first portion of the corner, but leaving the larger portion now separate, more regular in shape, and perhaps therefore more easily.
Go ahead.
More easy to develop, perhaps, with rezoning for it.
So no decisions have been made. I mean, it's a great point. I think part of the kind of back and forth here is that considering what the rest of the development would happen down there, the idea of what uses go in here and how do they operationalize is probably part of the conversation, especially considering the rest of the development in it. So is that a possibility? Sure. As it relates to the city though, city owns it all right now, so there's no need for us to sever anything.
And the zoning is before right now. So you get the only second question in just a moment, but I think we have a first question here, and then we'll conclude with the way we started. Sure.
Okay, I have a very simple outlook on everything because I don't know all the things that are going on, but I do know that I watched this building being built and I was thrilled with it. I almost cried when the museum went down. I don't feel it was well managed, but that's way back there. And then that restaurant that caused such havoc, especially to the Burlington people and the people along the perimeter of the waterfront and down there, down around the bay. That was not good.
It was not fun.
No, I'm sure. I bet you got called morning, noon, and night.
Well, it just, the whole thing is, you know, eventually we will have a finality to the issue of Sarcoa. And I hope you all are happy about that finality.
Yes.
Anyway, we'll leave it at that.
But I am also looking at a very good building.
Yes.
Right at the edge of where you're going to have all of these new people, these new buildings, all of the things that are happening. This would be a great place to get to know each other. This is a brand new neighborhood.
Yes.
No one is being there to establish, and they're going to be up and down elevators and things. So they're not going to know each other well. It's going to take a long time. So to keep this building as a people place, I think it would be so helpful. Right down to even. Knitting is coming back in fashion. They're all over the city, these little chapters of people learning how to knit. There might be people, I mean, that's very, whatever. You could have your book clubs, your people stuff, your cards.
Would it be too lame for me to pass around some Post-its and each person can write down some institutional ideas and institutional uses? We are taking notes. Knitting would be a first, but I've heard a lot. But just would it raise your hands if that's not a lame idea, and if you want me to hand around an opportunity for you to write down one or two institutional uses on a Post-it note. Is that something we can do? Okay, I have some here, and we'll get to that in just a second. We got to wrap it up, so go ahead.
Quick question that I think that I'm speaking on everybody's behalf, that we are afraid that this is a closed issue for the city. That is speaking for all of us on our behalf. But when you say we are the city, no. We are the city.
Yeah, I'm you.
Okay.
Yes.
I got you. That gets. But is this going to be a public forum?
Yeah.
Or is it going to be a closed city council meeting?
So I had already committed. I'll commit right now to a public meeting like this, possibly even here, maybe at the new close to $1 million community hall we're currently building at 125 Park, and it'd be maybe our first meeting if it times up that way. I led you. I gave you that line, Grant. And yes, there's also a public meeting in the form of a, as Chris mentioned, committee meeting. Folks, yes, Denise, real quick, we want that other presentation.
This is not a really inclusive place for a meeting. I'm just gonna say,
Okay, well,
people can't see, so I'm gonna suggest if we really want to engage people, let's have a comfortable space for people.
I like that idea. It's warm in here too up here. You know, we could turn the lights on, and actually, I have no problem with the Discovery Center as a venue. And anyway, that's it, folks. Sorry, you already went. Sorry, Brian. I can talk to you offline and stop talking to you. I want Chris to introduce the staff. I hope a lot of folks can hang around. If you did only come to offer your suggestions, ideas, comments with respect to this particular issue, and you want to leave, that's okay. But give us. Do we need to take 2 minutes to allow you to do that, because we don't even have a microphone here, Denise? So, Graham, go ahead. You can close it out because you actually have done a lot of work on
I'd like you to close it out, but I'd like to ask you, could you tell us what you're taking away from this portion of the meeting?
A lot of tremendous engagement. Great comments, questions, and unfortunately one small incident between myself and an individual, of which I've already apologized for. And I won't harp on that. So lots of stuff. And thank you. I'm here to listen. I'm here to listen. That's what I do. So thank you for what you do and what you've done and what you're going to continue to do, Graham. So I'll let Chris do the introductions.
So why don't we just take 2 minutes for those of you who this was the only issue that you came for, allow you to exit, and then we'll start up in 2 minutes. We encourage you to stick around though, because many of the things that you're actually asking about are in the next presentation.